I was about 4 years old. My mother had gotten hit by a drunk driver, and she was hospitalized for a long time, and I know that that memory is from that night. My grandmother shows up in my house through my door, and she came and picked me up and took care of me, and coming through that door, it was this, oh, Mimi, you're here, and I'm safe. And that kind of started a defining history to where my grandmother would be my Mimi, and she would always be there, and I always felt safe with her. I was diagnosed with ADHD in 1987, so imagine being a girl in the 80s and getting diagnosed and then medicated. Things were pretty rough, right? It was so hard in school. Oh gosh. If anybody went to the school locally and had open concept classrooms, I don't know if anybody knows what that is, but essentially the entire grade level has no walls, and what they used was 5-foot tall bookcases. And that's what lined the room. So imagine trying to be ADHD, trying to behave and learn when you've got fluorescent lights, 5 teachers teaching different subjects, and then, you've got kids with every single thing that they have and the noises that they all make. I couldn't do it. I got sick all the time. My sensory sensitivities were so much. And I would spend about as much time in the nurse's office as I was in the classroom. And they would say that I could fake my way to get to go home. So my grandmother would get the call a lot. And when she would show up, my chariot was this 1970s Lincoln Mark V, right? Cream color, and with AM radio playing, this red crimson interior that was soft and plush, and a faint smell of cigarette smoke. If anybody here was from the 80s, you know that every car smelled like cigarette smoke, right? And that was my chariot. She would come pick me up and I'd be like, oh, Mimi, you're here. Oh, good, I'm safe. Invariably, she would tell me on the way home how inconvenient it was and how I was a disruption to her life. But once we got to her house, it didn't matter. Because once we got there, what we know now are called sensory quiet rooms, and her guest bedroom was a sensory quiet room. You would go into this room, you would close the door, there would be a blanket that had these knit bubbles on the blanket. You could run your hands and it would calm down. The air conditioner, it was a window unit, because they built the house in the 1940s, there was no central air, so this window unit would blow Arctic cold air at the bed, and your nose would be freezing, you'd pull up the blanket, and then the white noise that would happen from that window unit. It was the world's greatest window unit. I don't know how environmentally safe it was, but it was amazing, right? And it was the only place I felt safe, because immediately I would be able to go to sleep, because everything was gone. And I could go to sleep, and I would wake up, and then it would start another day. But that's how I accommodated myself. And school was so hard. It was so hard. And the kids knew I was weird. They knew I was different. And things didn't get any better. And it just kept going. So eventually I dropped out because I thought that was, new start, drop out, yay. No, that didn't work. Because things went from bad to worse. And when you're already having a hard time, that's what happens. And so in 1998, I joined the Navy. And it took a while, but I got really good at the Navy stuff, really good, kind of go figure, ADHD person drives, so there's rules, regulations, clearly set expectations in uniforms. Go figure, right? But it really worked out, and I enjoyed my time in the Navy, and I met this amazing man, I got married, and then we decided to come back home, and I was so excited. My grandmother wasn't at my wedding when we got married, but that didn't matter because I knew I was going home and I knew that she was going to be there for me when I did. And then when I got home, I finally got pregnant after trying for years, and I was so excited because I knew my son was going to have those Miami memories too. But things didn't really go as planned because I kind of committed an egregious sin. I did not raise my kid the way that I was raised, and that was the expectation. So I followed my gut, and my gut was pretty spot on. He was thriving. He was such a happy kid. He was doing well in school. He had friends. Oh, it was amazing. Until high school. And then somebody else showed up at my door. And I was like, oh no, what's going on? He was angry. He was crying. It took me weeks to get him to open up. And when he finally did, what he said was so familiar to me that I felt it in my atoms. the big new high school campus, the friends turning into bullies, the calls and, ask for help from the counselors and the teachers just completely ignored. I was done. I knew what this was. So we pulled him out of school and we started homeschooling. And we did a really good job. Like, it was amazing. He was so happy. And then it was time to apply to colleges. And my kid was going to apply for scholarships, right? I mean, that's what we do. Well, come to find out, I was part of the Daughters of the American Revolution, right? So there's scholarship money, and we had those documents. So I'm going to go to Mimi, and we go to her house, and we are sitting at the table, and she hands me this book of family ancestry. And I start reading it, and it starts out in Anus, France. It's spelled on you, A-N-U-S, but it says Anus, France. And I mean, okay, that's interesting. So we go through the 16th century, we go through the 17th century, we get to the 18th century. 30 years before the Independence War is a page that said the last will and testament. And it said that I bequeath to my son. And there it was. It was concrete evidence that I was descended by people who held others hostage and passed them down to their children. Oh my God. So before I could even say anything, my grandmother says to what is akin to, but our family was probably the good ones, the nicer ones. Oh my God. In the house that I felt the most safe growing up. Mimi, we can never, no, what they did is never okay. We cannot make excuses for this. But there was just this silence in the room. And so we said our awkward goodbyes, and then we made it out to the car. And I remember having this book in my hand and turning to my son and going, hey, let's talk about what the fuck just happened. We do cuss at my house. And what we talked about, I asked him how he was feeling about his ancestors. We said, I'm sad and I'm uncomfortable. Yes, absolutely. We are feeling what our families didn't. We're reflecting on our history, and we're having empathy for the people that we hurt. So then we talk about what Mimi said, and it was how she pretended like our family didn't hurt other people, and what that felt like, and how it felt like all the air was pulled out of the room, and how that made it, her playing like it wasn't real, made it was worse than finding out that our family did this in our ancestry. And he looked at me and he just couldn't understand why. And I said, our family has committed generational trauma on so many, including us. And talking about the bad stuff doesn't make it worse, but pretending and creating an alternative history that we do when we're uncomfortable makes it to where no one can heal, and we're going to do better.